Welcome to Monday Morning Coffee with Inside the Firm. Each week, our hosts will be interviewing local, regional, and national business leaders to give you an inside peek into how they lead their business to success in the ever-competitive business climate.
Welcome to Monday Morning Coffee with Inside the Firm. Today I have a very special guest. Robert Poole is the co-founder of Total Business Results. He helps entrepreneurs who are tied to their businesses make the transition from operator to owner in their business so they can finally achieve the freedom that got them into entrepreneurship in the first place. Robert is also a graduate of West Point, previously an Army officer, and has over 25 years experience in helping entrepreneurs grow their companies and turn them into saleable assets that don't depend on them for day-to-day operations. Today, he is going to share a little bit about how to get you free from your business and get back to your freedom, as well as some cold calling advice. So, Robert, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Lance. It should be fun.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah, before we get into everything that I described in the preface there, I always have to ask every entrepreneur, how did you get here? Are you from a family of entrepreneurs? Are you the first? Where does that spirit come from?
It's interesting. I've been asked that before, and I don't really have a good answer because I think my family's not particularly entrepreneurial. My dad was the first one in his line to go to college, but we're always in the engineering space somehow. But so I kind of fell into it. And I think I realized the Army experience was kind of the antithesis of that. I realized that I didn't want that sort of bureaucratic type of corporate feel to my personality. Just didn't kind of jive with that too well. I'd really get frustrated with being closed in a box, and entrepreneurship allowed me to express myself and kind of get out there and do sink or swim, by yourself. And so I think it was one of those things I kind of fell into. And then as I grew it, I really realized how much I loved it. Over time, I learned to love, business owners in general, just because of the struggles that we go through as all business owners. And, we don't, in my opinion, business owners in this country don't get enough credit for what they do and what they add to this country. We talk a lot about, particularly with the last few years with COVID, we talk about things like the first responders and, how they're heroes and everything, which is absolutely true. I'm not taking anything away from them at all. But I think what you really hear is that business owners are really heroes. And I've seen that transition of myself for many, many years, not to pat myself on the back, but those around me. I've seen fellow entrepreneurs and seen the transition of what they've gone through. And so that's grown my love for entrepreneurship. So kind of a long answer, a little tangent there, but that's kind of how I kind of got into it.
Yeah, that was actually a great answer for not having an answer. So let's move into the cold calling part of it. So that was what I'm had you on the show for many reasons, but the top two, I think, were just to pick your brain about your experience doing business to business, cold calls. Like I said before we started recording, I know plenty of architects, engineers, and contractors in my industry, which is where the Inside the Firm revolves around. That cold call, they're looking for to network with architects or engineers are looking to network with me. And so it's I'm sure there's people in our audience that would love some insight on that. So if people are listening to this and they're thinking about, they want to maybe try that maybe next week or something like that, where they're looking to grow their business in that fashion, when they start preparing to do these phone calls, what do you think is essential before they pick up that phone for the first phone cold call?
Well, there's a lot of things into it, and I'll mention it later. But I'm in the middle of writing a book about that specific topic, about how you get started right on your own cold calling. But I think and it sounds a little cheesy, but I think the number one thing, of course, is the mindset, if you will. You can call it whatever you want, thick skin, all those good, things they like to throw around. But I found that early on when I was doing cold calls, and I've personally probably done over, I think I lost count at like 60,000 something, whatever. So I've done a lot, in other words. And what I found is that you have to kind of get your brain right. And it's not about getting your brain right in the sense that, okay, I'm gonna do a bunch of affirmations or something to get myself hyped up to get on the phone. It's about whatever you have to do to take that first call, make that first action. It's different for every person. But if we go into it with an attitude that where somebody out there is looking for what we're offering them, somebody out there needs what we're offering them, And if we look at it from a service standpoint and we're thinking about it from that way, every time we pick up the phone when we come into the office this morning, we say, hey, I'm going to reach out to, 50 people today or 100 or whatever depending on how your situation works. But if you take the attitude that here's this list and there's probably 40, 50 people on here who don't need what I'm going to talk to them about. And that's great. That's fine. That's, perfectly fine. My job though, is to get to that one person, because if I don't get to them, they're either going to they're going to be stuck in their where they are without a solution to the problem. They're going to be stuck not having what I can offer them and how I can help them. And so we're kind of, in a sense, kind of screwing them, by leaving them there hanging, if you will. And so that always was the number one thing that helped me and kept me going, because I've sold all kinds of things, over the phone. Originally, I was selling real estate, financial services. I did, executive recruiting, a bunch of different things. But, it all comes down to, do you believe in what you're selling? Number one, of course, I'm a big believer that you have to be able to feel good about what you're selling. But it comes down to focusing on the other person. And there are people out there that desperately need what you are. And you have a moral obligation to find them and talk to them and save them from, let's face it, there's probably, all of us probably have what we consider inferior competitors, even people that we wouldn't want our best friend dealing with. The question is, do we want, if somebody needs, they want to buy a new car, and we're a car salesperson, do we want them buying from some other guy down the street? No, we want them buying from us because we know that we're going to do it better for them because we care more about them. And so it's the same thing with any product or service, that if we singly focus on that person and what they're doing and how we can help them, with them in mind first, that is what has got me through, tens of thousands of cold calls personally, because it makes it easy when somebody hangs up on you. It's not like it's not rejection. That sounds strange, but it's kind of like, oh yeah, you're not the person I'm supposed to be talking to, but I got to hurry up and get on to that. That person's waiting for me there. Bob's down there on line, 15 or whatever. So that's the number one thing. There's a whole bunch of other stuff that, you can help yourself get to that point, but that's an overarching theme that I would really try to stick with that when you're about considering getting started on cold calling.
Yeah, I love that mindset going into it 100%, right? Okay, let's say we have that mindset, we're calling people, it's mostly going well, but then all of a sudden we get that, we feel the rejection. Somebody on one of those calls gives you the negativity and the rejection. What is your pivot after that? So that you try to make so that maybe doesn't happen on subsequent calls?
Well, I'll just be honest with you. It's going to happen on subsequent calls.
Yeah.
It's but I get what you're saying in the sense that, how do we keep ourselves from going down that rabbit hole, that tingling in the back of your neck that goes, oh boy, this person just chewed me out, or whatever, when you start to think, oh boy, and that's where, there's a lot of techniques you can use, but, the environment that you're in, your office, having, the environment that is a positive environment, that you've got, your favorite quotes and all that kind of stuff around you. That's kind of a given. You want to have all that stuff. But, the bottom line is, a lot of times I've found for me that if we take action physically doing something, that the mental part of it follows. So, somebody just called it, this guy's, you're the worst human being on the earth, and how dare you call me, and everything else, and every cuss word you can think of. You hang up and you're like, the number one thing that helped me is to be able to just go, okay, whatever, boom, pick up the phone, call somebody else. Because while that's happening, you may be on the inside going, oh geez, but you're going to find that person. Maybe it's not the next person, but the person after that goes, hey, yeah, thanks for calling. Hey, have a great day, whatever. And then you'll find yourself getting back into the momentum. The worst possible thing that I've done, and I've trained, hundreds of salespeople on this, is that to go, woo, I'm going to go get a cup of coffee. That was brutal,
Yeah.
I got to take a break from that. I can't take that again, and because you lose momentum, and cold calling is all about momentum. You have to have that. And so if you lose that momentum, you're going to get a momentum, and you're going to allow that momentum in a bad way. You're going to go down that rabbit hole. And it's a lot harder to get back out of that versus if you just tripped on it and okay, boom, get back on the phone, make the next call. And it doesn't give your brain time to go down that rabbit hole with all those negative thoughts. So it's physical activity. Pick up the phone and do the next dial.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, keep it going. I'm surprised you said coffee instead of maybe scotch. I'm sure sometimes people are like, let's go get a scotch. So
This is a family friendly show, right? I can watch my
yeah,
right.
sure it is. No, I appreciate the coffee pivot. One last thing about the cold calling part. Actually, it's a two-part question here, and that is, I think a lot of people maybe, especially, I'm technically right in between millennial and Gen X, and I would say I'm more Gen X. I'm just, an older 41-year-old than most are. But definitely I can see, millennials and Gen Z, and we have a lot of those that listen to the show from that generation where they go, cold calling, that's still a thing.
Yeah.
That's kind of maybe their misconception. I wonder if you have any other misconceptions, and then if it is still a thing, and obviously we're talking about it, so it must be, how has cold calling evolved most recently?
Yeah, no, it's interesting, and you're absolutely right. I think it's probably the number one question, and even people who are older, even people who are my age, I'm 52, so I'm a little bit older, but people think because of the emphasis on digital marketing, all the tools and everything we have
Yeah.
these days, that they think, why would you do something so antiquated like cold calling, and it's true that cold calling has certainly changed. When I started out in this was the mid '90s, when I was kind of just starting out as doing cold calling when I got out of the army. With the technology wasn't there. These days you've got a soft dialer. Basically, you pick up your headset on your computer, and you can buy a little dialer for $20 a month or something that'll do dials for you. I mean, very sophisticated things. But back when the old school people did it, it was pick up the telephone and start physically dialing that keypad with a piece of paper there and a ruler to try to keep your place. And we even went so far because in those days there were still residential telemarketing, and consumer telemarketing was still a thing. And in those days, those are the only companies that could afford like the auto dialers, the kind that would make thousands of phone calls and just kind of hand every time somebody would pick up a prospect could pick up the call, it would route it to an agent instantaneously. But you couldn't do that as a small business owner, so we came up with things like a technique I used for a couple of years, double phones, where you literally have two physical phones and two headsets, one connected to each phone. And you would start dialing on this one, start letting it ring, and then you start dialing on this one, listen for this one. If nobody picked up after the fourth ring, you dropped it and kept going on this side. And then you kept going until somebody picked up on whichever line. You go to the other one. So that's what we were trying to do. That's how antiquated.
Yeah.
But that's what it was from the technology standpoint. Now, like I said, for next to nothing, you can have all the features that we didn't have back then, and so the technology has taken a huge leap, as we all know, in every aspect of business. But and the perception is, and as you said, it's kind of a two-part thing, because the perception is, well, they've gotten rid of cold calling, because when you say cold calling, people think dinner table, there's some telemarketer interrupting me, or some scam artist trying to get me to close me on the phone right out of Boiler Room, the movie or whatever. What we're talking about when we say cold calling, we're talking about business to business. It's about one professional talking to another. So it's a completely different. The perception is that they kind of lump those together when they really aren't at all the same thing. I mean, they are in essence, the word telemarketing can be B2B, but in reality, people have that idea of what it is that it's one of those calling at your dinner table type of things, which is not what we do. And that part of it has changed because that's no longer there. The perception is still there, though it gets lumped in together. So that's a negative that you kind of have to fight through, because people don't understand that. But one of the real positives of cold calling that you didn't have back then, cold calling was one of the major ways you did. There wasn't a lot of, small business. You couldn't afford to send a ton of mailers, for instance. But you could these days. You can run Facebook ads and LinkedIn all very, very cheaply, per se, compared to what you used to be able to do. But all those formats are also still very, they're not personalized. And we have, as everybody knows, everybody gets behind a keyboard and become a hero. And, we've got social media and all the issues that we've got these days, so it's really changed. We've lost some of that personalization. And a great thing about cold calling that you didn't have before, that I don't think a lot of people realize, now normally when you cold call somebody, I mean, we're talking face to face here.
Yeah.
And we've gotten very used to it with COVID, doing the video, which I think is actually a positive. I actually really enjoy it because I feel like I'm meeting somebody one-on-one. And so you have that person-to-person touch that you don't have in other mediums. You can't do that through any kind of digital marketing ad, even email or anything else. When it's one-to-one, when you're talking to somebody over the phone or video call, like Zoom or whatever, you have a huge advantage that you don't have with some of those modern things. And I think a lot of people don't realize how important that is, because we're, psychology-wise, human beings haven't changed much, and however many thousands of years you think we've been here, whether it's 5,000 or 5 million. But we're still pretty much the same, that we can record in history. We think the same, and we need that person-to-person connection. And when we do things like digital marketing, we're trying to replicate that, but it's very hard to do. And the other thing is that cold calling is the ultimate direct response marketing. In the circles, you'll hear that term, which basically just means versus billboard advertising, where you're putting your name State Farm Stadium somewhere and hoping somebody calls because they like the name of the stadium. But you see that with large corporations. But obviously, if you're doing digital marketing, you want to know your click-through ratio and your CPM, all that stuff. But the one thing that you can't do is you can't get that person on the other side of the keyboard to make a decision right then. I mean, they can make a decision as in, I'll probably do that later. I'll look into that later, which is usually what it has if they have any interest.
Yeah.
But they're not pushed to do anything. Even if they're really interested, they're like, I'll do that when I get home. It always almost gets procrastinated. That's why the percentage of click-through is so small. Whereas with a cold call, when you call somebody, they have to make a decision. So you've got Bob on the line or Mary, and you say, hey, Mary, we've seen you're a competitor down the street. We've helped them do some of this work down there. A company that had all the same problems that you have. We started working with them and helped them get through that problem. And boom, this is where they are on the other side. And you're there talking to Mary or whatever, and she has to make a decision. Do I want to talk to this guy further? Do I believe what he's saying? Or do I, no, I don't want to talk to him at all. But either way, you're getting instant feedback. Right away, is this a lead or not? Is this a valid lead? That's going to tell you a lot more information than just, a digital marketing ad will. So again, a lot of information that you could go really down to, rabbit holes on this stuff. But I think you got misperceptions and what has changed in the business. So I think it's changed for positive personally, because I think that cold calling gives you an advantage that we didn't have 25 years ago, because it wasn't stressed as much, because everything was personalized, from that standpoint. So that's where I would go with that.
Yeah. Let's shift a little to being an operator versus being an owner of a business. Maybe you can start with the definition that you have for each of those.
Yeah, well, I always like to look at it like a litmus test. If you look at your business, if you can drop what you're doing tomorrow, book yourself a trip to Tahiti, not take your laptop, not take your smartphone, go over there, have fun for a month. When you come back, is your business still in business, for one? And is it growing, even more importantly? And if you're not in that stage where you can do that, then you're still kind of in that spectrum of operator, which means you're still integrally involved in the business enough that the business is ultimately dependent on you to do things. And the goal in business is to create that asset, which is a business that is sellable, even if you don't ever want to sell it. But the goal is to create it so that you are owning something that serves you, and you're not serving us. And it's the irony that we all get into entrepreneurship because we say, number one, I want to be my own boss, and two, I want to make as much money as I possibly can. I don't want somebody else, deciding that for me. And usually you talk to an entrepreneur 2 or 3 years after they get a business, and it's kind of like, well, how's that working out for you? You're making less money, working more hours, and you're stressed and everything else. It's not exactly what it worked out to be. So, with my whole background in owning this company that does cold calling for what are we on 23 years now, in this particular entity, I went through this whole situation. I went from zero, we had nothing, literally, my business partner and I, and no funding or anything, and had to kind of figure some of this stuff out. It took me a very long time to figure that out. So back in 2017, in that range, we started making a shift and started talking to our clients about this whole concept of, hey, this is great, we're delivering all these leads to you, but what about the rest of your business? And so I think I got off track of your original question. I'm sorry again, but I get excited talking about this stuff. But it really is, it's making that transition from the operator who is the business is completely reliant on, that if you die today, the business might be able to sell parts of it off, might not. Somebody might be able to salvage it, might not, but most likely it's going to take a major hit. Versus an owner, if something happens to them, things are set up where the business functions by itself as its own entity. So there you go.
Yeah, no, I think you nailed it. I think the tangents you went on were actually perfect, and you answered the question in your own way. So it's all good, Robert. How long when people are trying to make that transition happen, do you have any idea of like a timeline? I'm sure every business is unique with, you know, different nuances and everything like that. Like for me, you had my brain thinking, boy, like we actually tested it last summer. We were trying to get some of our top employees to become salesmen, and they failed dramatically. And it gave me some self-reflection, thinking like, oh man, I think part of it, to be fair to them, was the economy was tricky. It's a little better now. It's easy to sell in a hot climate, right? Like in a hot business climate. It's hard to sell in a cold one, maybe. And then, but there's a lot to just being as a salesman, convincing, charming, funny, all of the instilling confidence in people and stuff like that. So maybe we could just focus in on like if it was me, right? How long do you think the transition should take? If the thing that would not allow me to be transition over from just an operator to an owner and being more hands off is the salesman's part of it. What do you think? What does that kind of process look like? How long should it take?
You know, and you're right, what you brought up originally. So with that caveat of every business is different, you know,
Yeah.
I always say it's like the difference between, you know, you've got an ocean liner, you want to change 180 degrees. It's that, how long is that going to take versus you've got a speedboat? You know, obviously if you're young and nimble and you started your business a couple of years ago, maybe you're not as entrenched in your ways, you know, it's a lot easier to change that direction. And that's where it also varies in where you are in your business, not so in the sense of size, but as far as the sense of where those areas of the business are that maybe are not self-sufficient. And we'll take sales, for instance. I don't know enough about your business landscape, you know, to get into the deep, but just I'm just guessing and, you know, talking about it in general, you know, if we say, hey, I've got 5 salespeople, but, you know, if they're not there, if I'm not there cracking the whip and, you know, constantly on them, they're over by the water cooler or down the street, they're drinking that scotch we were talking about, or, you know, things kind of fall apart, but it works if I'm there. And what it's about is the whole goal of whenever I look at making that transition from operator to owner is how do I create a bunch of, instead of employees, a bunch of mini owners. And what I mean by that is not necessarily equity owners, like they don't have to actually own a financial interest in the company, but we want all of our employees to think of the company as if they were the owner, as if they were an owner of the company. Because that we all know when we have ownership of something, you know, we do the right things when nobody else is looking. So we're going to pick up that phone. Those guys that are on the phone on Friday afternoon, most salespeople think, oh, nobody picks up the phone on Friday, which, by the way, is a total lie. So don't let anybody ever tell you that, salespeople. That's the best time to pick up the phone because everybody else is telling themselves they should be calling. So same thing with holidays and, you know, the down times, all that, you know, you got to think backwards a little bit.
Yeah.
So, you know, if we look at it differently in the sense that we know that those people that we have complete trust with them, and it can be salespeople, it could be, you know, in your case, we're talking about the sales department, or it could be, you know, administrative people, any number of the operations people. If you have, you know, fulfillment, if you've got products or services, you've got to be able to trust those people and know that that in your absence, you have zero hesitation that everything is working fine. And, you know, there's different aspects to that. There's, you know, one of the things that really helped us as I was making this transition, I don't want to get into a long story about it, but basically I lost my business partner, and back in 2017, it was real sudden, and we had very defined lines in the company. He handled client service and sales, and I did, you know, operations, HR, all the other stuff behind the scenes. And when he passed away, suddenly there I am in charge of this big company. And suddenly it was, in the past, it was like, well, I could take a 3-week honeymoon, you know, because why? He's there, he can handle it, you know, he's just handling some stuff for me. But then suddenly I got back to where, geez, I can't take a day off. I mean, the company's literally, it's not functioning by itself. So we started doing things like documentation. And it's, when it comes to administrative or fulfillment, operations, any of those things, people tend to think about that, but it's the same thing in sales. And, not to get, again, I love my tangents, but, salespeople tend to think, well, hey, we're in sales, give me some leads. I'm going to make some calls. I'm going to close some deals, and hey, great. And they'll put sales numbers up. But what we don't do is document in the sense that, okay, here's the script the script that's working the best for all of us. We're going to tweak it and continually tweak it. We're going to work on these skills or whatever. And that stuff is written down. And any new employee, any new salesperson that comes in, we need to be able to literally hand them a book. And I like to do it in different ways, something in writing, some kind of online type of thing. And it can be very basic. I mean, you can start out with a Word document or something, but something that documents the best practices that you're doing, so that when you're going to have, as you go through and try to find those people that are going to become those mini owners, we want to be able to not take an enormous amount of time to train those people and go through that, because it just kills us as a small business owner. The churn in employees is probably the most difficult thing there is as a small business owner, trying to find the right team. But if we're documenting, and I'll just use that word that way, if we're documenting those things, those aspects, those processes of everything from salespeople, how we pick up the phone, what does a receptionist say? If we have a receptionist, what happens when somebody becomes a new client? What's the first email they get? All those kind of things. And it can be very overwhelming. When I say that, some people are thinking, oh my gosh, because I know that's the way I felt, certainly. But in my case, because I knew I couldn't do it, and I didn't know enough about these areas, we actually hired a contractor to come in and basically sit with different people to learn their jobs and to document their jobs. And boy, that was some of the best money we have ever spent, because it allowed us to get that stuff down, where then when we bring in a new person now, it's kind of like, boom, here's your stuff. You're going to learn all these things, and you're going to be able to do the job that used to take somebody 6 months to figure out. You're going to be able to do it in a month. And it doesn't matter what part of the company. So documentation is a huge thing. It's not a fun thing. I'll be honest with you. Most entrepreneurs don't want to be, they're not excited when you say the word documentation. They're thinking, oh, geez, why don't I just, kill myself? That's, it's like, oh, that's bathroom reading or whatever. But little things like that, the documentation, getting those done once, allows us to make that transition, so that once again, not only are we not doing some of those tasks, that as we're writing these processes, we're going to find out, some of these tasks nobody should be doing. And so there's a lot of benefits to that. But so I would say I would start with documentation. And to answer the original question too, the time frame, if you have zero documentation, if you have zero processes set up, other than, Bob over there, he does it this way, Jane over here, she does it that way. And, and it also depends on how much people fight that change, because, hey, let's face it, people don't like change, me included, just like everybody other human being. And so if we get the right people to buy into it, that change, we document all those things, you can turn that thing around in, 6 months, you can make a huge difference in it. Or it could take 6 years if you've got people that don't want to go along with the change, and you're not, you don't have the time or whatever to desire to bring in new people. So it's varied in that sense, but it can be done very quickly. But it's a big commitment. I'll be honest with you. But it's like everything, everything you want is on the other side of fear, and things you don't want to do. So you've got to just buckle down and decide, hey, do I want to become an owner of this company, or am I going to continue to be an operator and just keep doing what I'm doing? And then when I'm old enough, I can't do it anymore, I hope that's a close security check and I got enough in business investments to hang out. But if we really want that freedom that we got into this for, we have to address this at some point. So yeah, I would say that would be the number one thing, if you're trying to figure out how long it's going to take and what do we start with.
Yeah. Well, I'll give everybody a hack too. And there's writing it down, and then there's recording it too. And so if longtime listeners of the show would know that one of the things we were trying to do when we were trying to set up people to do sales here was that I would record the sales meetings that I was having. It's a one-party consent state, and it was essentially an internal document. And then, so screen capturing on Zoom, that was actually kind of one of the silver linings, was like, oh, I was having sales meetings with people on Zoom during COVID, and then even after, and still now. I would record them. They had no idea it was happening. The other people, so nobody was uncomfortable in any kind of way, and it was very candid. Same thing, I would turn my phone on in certain meetings and record that way, and that was super helpful. And then kind of writing, there was a writing component to it. So I just want to let it, like, there are ways to hack into it while you're doing it in real time, killing two birds with one stone.
Yeah.
Robert, we're running up on the half hour here, and I got two questions I ask everybody. First one is, knowing what you know now, and if you could go back in time when you first started your business, what is one piece of advice you give yourself? Silence. What the heck? Did I do it?
There's the guy who keeps talking won't shut up.
Got him. Everybody, we got him.
Yeah. That's so hard because, as we all know, there's so many of them that talked to me 10 years ago. What would I say? Like, wow, you got to pick one, or I think, and this is something that I've really learned the last few years, is that what happens to us happens for us. And that sounds like a broad statement and kind of, ethereal, whatever.
Providential. It's providential, brother.
All those foo-foo words, which I'm not a big fan of, but it really is true. And it changed my life. And the reason is because if we look at every, that quote, bad thing that happens to us, every disaster, we get sued by some company for no reason, no valid thing, or, we lose our best key employee just out of the blue, any number of things that would be considered catastrophic. If we go through that, we can either, stick our head in the sand and go, oh my God, why did this happen to me? And well, geez, it must be the people in Washington. It must be the economy. It must be that. And if we stop doing that and say, you know what, instead of focusing on and trying to find the silver lining, so to speak, or be happy or be positive about this whole thing, which is what some, self-help gurus would tell you, I say, my attitude is, okay, well, how is this going to force me to grow? You know what? I've just lost the person that was so integral to our company, and I don't know how to hire a good person to replace her. Well, guess what? Now I need to learn how to become that person who hires top-notch people who can go and do it at will. And so this never happens to me again. And what those bad things do, so to speak, are push us and pull us in the direction of becoming the person that we would want to be, because our business is only going to grow to the extent that we do as people. So if we use those experiences as growth experiences, that is probably the number one thing that has helped me personally, probably in the last 5-6 years, once I've kind of discovered and started living that profile. Yeah, beautiful. Robert, thank you so much. You've been a fantastic guest, a lot of insight, a lot of knowledge. I hope everybody really enjoys this as much as I have in the interview. Where can people find and follow you if they want to get in touch with you and your services and the book and all that? Yeah, absolutely. You can visit our website, totalbusinessresults.com, and you can find out about the cold calling aspect of it and some other things we do. As I said, I mentioned at the beginning, I'm writing a book. We're in draft manuscript time, so it's about ready to get to the editor stage, which I don't typically want to do that, but in your case, and it's just occurred. It wasn't part of the script. I thought, you know what, we talked about a lot of these concepts, but I'm just going to throw that out there. If anybody's interested in reading, it's just my general thoughts on the whole subject of not how to cold call necessarily, although that's part of it. It's how does a business owner integrate cold calling into their business? Should they be calling, and how best to do it, whether it's hiring a third party, whether it's doing it yourself or hiring an inbound team. So if you're interested in getting a draft copy of that, just email me. It's super simple, Robert at operator2owner.net.com. So Robert at operator2owner.net. And then, of course, you can find me on all the social media stuff, YouTube and all that, just by my name, Robert Poole. Fantastic. Robert, thanks so much. God bless you. Have a great day, buddy. Thank you for being a guest on the show. Yes, thank you so much.